We are all set.
I would like to call the regular meeting of the Village of Elmont Planning Commission for January 5th, 2023 to order, please. May I have a roll call?
Tedeschi,
Here.
Meek,
Here.
Kalka, Schneider, Dyke, Zender.
Here. Thank you very much. In your board packet is the agenda for tonight's meeting. If there are no alterations, changes, or anything else, I would like a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
I think Glenn seconded. Yes, I think so. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the December 1st, 2022 meeting. Included in your packet is a summary of all the discussions that we had at that particular meeting. If there are no changes, alterations, or corrections, I would accept a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I have a small edit.
Okay,
Page 3, unfinished business. 4 paragraphs down. Given minute of Trent is given. Second line, Association of Planning Conference regarding affordable, I presume that would be housing. Otherwise, I'd move to approve.
are there any other changes by any of the members? Otherwise, I would accept a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved. I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there anybody in the audience that has any comments to be made tonight regarding or adding to the agenda? No. Okay. There are no public hearings this evening. The next item on the agenda is under new business, the 2022 Planning Commission Annual Report. Kim was kind enough to include a copy of the report in your board packet. I had a chance to take it, look it over. I don't think we missed anything. Does anybody have any comments to it? Any corrections or changes or anything to it? It wasn't an overly active year, but we did a little bit of work. We did a little bit of work anyway, based on what was required. If not, if there are no changes to it, then I would entertain a recommendation to Village Council to have the report entered into the record. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Yes.
So the annual report should be forwarded to the Village Council to that extent.
I'm sorry. All right. Kim, can we make that alteration? I'll get it right one of these years. But anyway. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is unfinished business, and that is the 780 North Van Dyke Special Land Use Request. David, do you want to fill us in a little bit on anything that you have come up with over the last month or so?
I really don't have much additional information over and above what's in your packet.
Okay. And nothing in the packet has actually changed from what we had last month, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And we did make contact with Mr. Hecker, who I understand is present tonight. And he was aware of some of the concerns that were generated from our discussion at our last meeting. And because of the holidays, he was concerned about whether or not he would be able to comply with all of the information that this commission might be anticipating tonight. But hopefully he's got some updates that he can provide this commission tonight. And other than that, I think they have any extra information. Caitlin, do you have anything for us before we have?
Mr. Eckert.
So the only thing I would do is that I think what we're discussing tonight is focusing more on the special land use approval and
Yes.
appropriateness of the quantity of residential units that are proposed.
Mhm.
Because this is an increase in the number of rental units, that's why it's coming forth for a special land use to enlarge their special land use.
Okay.
So just as a quick reminder, that's 4 units on the main floor and then 4 more units on the 7th story, which is residential over residential. It wouldn't be where the commercial tenants currently are, about Edward Jones and things of that nature. There would be a top or somebody above their facility. And so then if you were to consider the special land use tonight, you would want to consider making it contingent upon site plan review and approval. And so that's the opportunity the applicant would be able to then provide a lot of that missing information we discussed in length at our November meeting. We waived some of them. We said we needed some additional stuff for engineering and compliance of that nature, but otherwise don't see a fundamental change from the site plan provided. The applicant is not proposing to change anything major regarding the footprint of the actual building. So there would be some parking lot changes that would be potentially made, and then some interior building components that would be needed to be changed. Other than that, it's mainly flow, and then the exterior was talked about at length at those meetings, so that would be improved to meet our current standards.
At our last meeting, we had the motion to postpone had this in it, and it was upon revised plans to address site compliance issues and further attendance to answer questions. So I'm assuming Mr. Eckert here's to answer questions. You haven't seen anything further as far as site plans yet, have you?
Correct.
You have not? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I did have my members join my business discussion that Mr. Eckert has reached out to the fire marshal to address some of the concerns that as far as final site plan review issues and concerns, but there has been that preliminary discussion with Fire Chief Smith to ensure that the applicant would be aware of some of those issues that will come up as this project proceeds.
Mr. Eckert, welcome back.
Sorry, I missed the last video. I did embarrassing.
Well, and I'm assuming it was relayed to you, some of our concerns at the last meeting.
I took the time to look at the.
Especially the one from your tenant. I mean, he asked some very good questions, and we really didn't have answers for him. So that was one of our concerns, along, with some other issues. So.
I watched the video.
Oh.
And I reached out to Andy. Nice individual. And I apologize for not having communication with him prior to the time that we had that meeting. And his concerns were valid, but they're nothing that can't be handled. Some of his concerns were, the tenancy, and if there would be children there, to be the, playscapes and, people working on cars, all those things can be written into a lease to alleviate any problems with a tenant. And typically they are, you're not going to let somebody work on a car in a commercial location. I also talked to him about, designated parking for his facility, and talked to him in depth about the fact that, the renovation of the building as a whole is going to benefit, his business dramatically.
Some very good questions, and since we really we haven't seen any of your plans as far as what the building will look like, we were sitting here a little dumbfounded. We really couldn't answer his questions. So that's.
And I tried to get something tonight, but it's Christmas holiday and, the architect and trying to get things accomplished, but that will be forthcoming. Mr. Trappist and his wife, Trace, they understand exactly what you're looking for in regard to the quality of the building and the look of it. Would you like to?
Yeah.
Sure.
Please.
Rob Trappist. I wasn't able to make the last meeting. We're going to come through now. We'll put together a good print that's showing exactly what we're doing to the building. We plan on putting a stone front, belt line in, possibly some hardy board. We're trying to work on, architects working on some different kind of new siding. We're going to try to keep the country feel, but more of a modern style. That's what I do. We build buildings. I'm a general contractor, so we're going to make it look pretty good between my architect and me. So hopefully I can get something to you guys in a couple of weeks now, and we can look it over. And if you guys want to make any kind of altercations or anything like that, I'm willing to work with you. But like I said, I think we're going to keep that country feel. We're going to keep, some of that shed type roofing, and but we're probably going to put like a steel roofing on, kind of pretty much what everybody's been doing down the line Van Dyke right now, and pretty much everywhere else. So that's about it, unless you guys got any questions.
I think, and then too, have you met with the fire marshal to talk to him about any changes to be made in your building and what he will expect as far as being able to service
Yeah, Glenn's
that building?
talked with him, and then I will talk with him myself.
I just don't want you to go ahead and do all your plans
No, we'll
and then
make
leave
yeah.
something out.
No, we'll make sure that we get his blessing on everything.
Okay.
And, we'll speak with him before I, get with my architect and design everything to, that way we only got to do it once instead of 2, 3,
Sure.
4 different times.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're excited to get it going. I'm going to actually probably move one of my offices next to Elder Jones there. So we'll be coming into town. We're from Richmond. We have some things out there and some other properties all over. But yeah, we're excited to come into Elmont and do some stuff here.
So as far as you're concerned, then your current tenant is pleased, at least acceptable with what you're doing?
Yes,
'Cause he wasn't last
I
meeting.
know. I guess he, I talked to him this morning actually, and he was all for it. He was excited. He just he felt that he was kind of like stuffed off in the corner and nobody told him nothing. He's like, what's going on here? So I told him that, exactly what we were going to be doing, and he was all aboard. He was excited to have us in there and, work together with him on some things. And yeah, so he's all for it. He was going to try to make the meeting today. He said, no, he could make it for sure, but he was all for it.
Get a cop.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did you happen to get a copy of the letter from the DPW as to some of the concerns that they have?
So I know that Dave, my partner, was here last time, and he briefed me on the water line, that it might not be sufficient enough. So if we need to bring a new water line in, that's not a problem. I'm finding out now that there's a problem with the sanitary line. I own an excavation company, so we plan on taking care of all that too. If we got to add more water, I think he said we got to put a 2-inch line in there. I don't know if there's a 1-inch line going in there now.
3/4.
3/4. So we're definitely going to have to bring a 2-inch line in.
Yeah.
I can confirm Andy Rose's acquiescence of going up to this point.
Okay.
Yes, I received an email from Mr. Rose as well, so.
So
I'm sure he knew.
yeah, we're here to work with you. I work with a lot of cities. We're gonna do things the way they got to be done and move on. Okay. And if you guys got any questions, I don't know if you guys got my number, but I think we filled out something, didn't we, when we came in here the first time?
Yeah, it's on the petition.
Yeah. So, any questions, feel free to call. And I'll bring a set of prints, hopefully in a couple weeks, and we can review it. And if we got to make some adjustments, we'll do it.
Have any other questions or concerns? Caitlin, do you have any? Yes, please.
Would you like me to go over the special land use standards, just to kind of go over them and refresh us? The intent behind the special land use standards is that you have to meet all of them to justify the approval,
Yes, please. if
as
you would.
opposed to one specifically needs to be named if we were to consider a denial.
Yeah.
So looking over the approval standards, this is from the analysis of the special land use checklist that I'm reviewing. So I think that's page 28. All right. So the first standard talks about the proposed special land use, which is the residential apartments, is located, sized, in the character, and that's harmonious with the surrounding area and neighborhood. Our findings are that the proposed residential apartments are harmonious with the surrounding area, which are primarily commercial properties to the east and west, but also residential to the northeast. The second standard regards the proposed use based on the nature of the vehicle traffic and pedestrian traffic. It's not causing a hazardous situation or issue with site review or things of that nature. Based on the provided application, they're not proposing to change anything with the driveway. That is MDOT's domain as well. They are going to increase the maneuverability on site with some different revisions. And so those, we anticipate those will be value added, clarifying the flow of traffic in the parking lot area. Third is that the proposed use related to being harmonious with the physical and economic aspects of the area, that it provides convenience for patrons, and that there's adequate services provided by the village. It would appear that based on the surrounding area and our ability, they already have some existing utilities. There may need to be some tweaking done there, but we have capacity that we would be able to accommodate what their request is for the additional housing on site. And then the last standard, number 4, is that the proposed use is detrimental to the neighborhood in which it is located, and that it's harmonious with the general purpose of the zoning ordinance. And so due to the nature of it being commercial and some residential nearby, there already are some residentials currently in that specific complex, that it would be appropriate. So that is our analysis.
Any of the members have any questions? It is understood, though, amongst all of us that this project needs to meet all 4 requirements. If one is not acceptable, then the approval will be. Are we all agreed on that? Is there any member that does not accept all the 4 proposals as they stand right now?
I think I want to reiterate what I expressed at our last meeting, excuse me, from the standpoint that while we do want to hold the applicant to the standards to the extent that's feasible, on the other hand, I at the same time want to keep in mind the fact that the development of this building is really important to the village. That building's been empty for 20, 25 years, something like that. It used to be a primary attraction. And so if we're close on an issue, I like the commission members to keep that in mind and not be overly restricted if it's not necessary. So I'm not saying to ignore it. I'm not arguing to ignore the standards. On the other hand, it should be the perspective of the commission members to make this happen if conceivable, feasible. So that's my 2 cents.
Any other comments from any of the members? If none, then at the bottom, after those 4 items, if you'll notice, there was a motion written for us by Caitlin, which was very nice. And I would entertain a motion as it's written, and I'm assuming because we have not seen a site plan that qualification needs to be in our motion. Is that correct, Caitlin?
So it'd be the contingency as part of the first proposed sample motion regarding approval with conditions.
Yes.
It's saying that on-site plan approval by the planning commission.
Yes.
That is your contingency.
Yes, that's our contingency, which means you will get permission to go forward, but then you will come back to us and we'll review your site plan.
Correct.
And then if the site plan meets our requirements, then you're allowed to go ahead full bore. So what you're getting tonight, if it's approved, is the special land use request that you're asking for. And then with the help of our engineers and architects, we will review your site plan at another meeting and see if that meets our requirements. As acceptable to you?
Sounds fair.
Okay. Kim, do you mind if we just use the motion? Is that an acceptable motion? Caitlin
Somebody
did such a
has
good
to-
job.
Someone has to read it.
I know. Okay, all right. All right. Do I have a member who wants to read the motion?
I do.
All right, go right ahead, Steve.
What page were you at?
It's on page 33. Is that 30, 29? No, 29. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's right after the four
I
items.
love reading this stuff. 29?
Yes. It says sample motions. It would be the first one. With approval with conditions.
There we go. Okay. So I see now. So I make the motion to approve the requested special land use for, and this says 8 residential. Did I see 7 somewhere?
It is
No?
8.
It is
It is still 8.
4 and
Okay.
4.
So something, okay. 8 residential apartments, presume that's supposed to be apartments, located at 780 Van Dyke Road, based on the applicant meeting all standards listed in section 8.02.
Which were the 4 items that we reviewed.
Further, in order to ensure compliance with these standards, the following conditions are part of my motion to approve site plan approval by the Planning Commission.
I have a second to that motion.
Second.
Is there any other discussion by any of the members? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried.
Sir.
You have your special land use.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
How soon does the road need their plans and that?
So we need typically site plans to be submitted at least 2 weeks prior to your planning commission meeting. So it would be a secondary review, and so usually a 1 week turnaround's okay. Because no engineering's been reviewed, I would say that it would be better to have 3 weeks. So that way, 3 weeks prior to the meeting, we have 2 weeks to review, 1 week prior to be on,
So it
to be
would
sent in the
it would
packet
Probably be March's
that.
meeting,
um,
because our February's meeting is February 2nd. There's no way they're going to get it done in
correct.
that.
Yep, so
Okay.
it would be more likely that it would be
Sir,
a
we'll probably
March.
be looking to review your site plan in order to give you enough time and the engineers to give enough time. It will be March's meeting, not February's. Because they're going to need, because of the engineering and everything else you have to do, they need 2 or 3 weeks lead time, and then they need to review it. And our next meeting is February 2nd, so I doubt we'd ever make that one. So you can get all your stuff done and have it ready, and we'll probably put it on March agenda.
So I can get it in by like middle of February,
Even, you could probably do that even sooner. Yeah, as soon as you can get it into them, the better it is.
That would be ideal.
Okay, no problem. Okay.
Because
It's the first Thursday.
March 2nd.
Oh, my
March
birthday.
2nd too. The only reason I say that is because if they find some difficulties and they have enough lead time, you can work with them even before you come to us in March. So in general, we could possibly look at a very finalized set of drawings by the time you come in March, if everything goes well. Then we can try not to hold you up any more than necessary.
That sounds great.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. All right, before we adjourn, we have Caitlin delivered an item for us. Caitlin, you want to go over this wonderful
Sure
piece of
did.
information we have?
Sure. I apologize for having it be submitted a little tardy due to the holidays and such. So what we talked about at our last meeting was looking at some standards to allow for the deferment of required parking. And so what we wanted to do is provide an avenue without making somebody go to get a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. This body would be able to administer some discretion regarding the amount of paved parking. And so the intent of this is during your site plan review process, you would be able to evaluate, the applicant would show what their parking analysis is to justify that I don't need the total number of required parking spaces. And so during that site plan review, they would clarify where on the site plan, so they still have to show where those reserved spaces are as part of their site plan, and then would implement them upon evaluation of a change in use or some part of their operation, or for that matter, a violation situation. If they continuously are parking on the grass or something like that, which would be a hint that they've changed their operation, that it doesn't work. And then they would have to put in those reserved spaces. So the intent being is that we're still holistically looking at what is the total required, and they have to put it in some way on their site plan so it's consistent and is easy to add on. That's the intention. And so one of the things we put in there to kind of help this discretion over time is they cannot exceed more than 20% of the required as not being put in, but having some discretion that we understand that isn't necessarily a one-fits-all formula. So with those different components, either implemented or deferred parking spaces, those all would need to meet our minimum size requirements. So clarifying that. One of the things I noted on here is clarification on landscaping. So one of the things is that we do require 1 tree per 6 parking spaces. With the 20% rule, it's not uncommon that there probably would be 6 parking spaces that could be part of that deferment. So my question for clarification is that we should bake in this is, are they required to put in deferred trees? And we'll go after them for that. Or is it put in all the required trees, and because they're on their site plan, they're showing where those reserved spaces are, we're still accounting for those trees not causing a hazardous situation because it's part of that plan. Does that make sense?
Right.
Try that one more
All
time.
right. So if you imagine like your I guess your square of what your parking lot or your parcel, you have your
Okay.
building and you have your parking lot. Well, let's say north of that is the reserved spot. So they have full access drive, and then they're going to add another 20 spaces. Actually, no, we're going to do 12
But under
because
the-
that's
but under the
easier by 6.
initial- Their initial construction, they're not going to build those reserved places, is that right?
That's
But they
right.
show them on the prints.
That's right.
Okay.
So
go
they
ahead.
would be clearly labeled. So if everyone can, I guess we haven't reviewed a site plan recently that has phases in it, but think of it as a phase development where they are clearly labeling it as deferred or a phase development to show this is the required parking we're supposed to put in. And then there's these 12 spaces that are deferred that we don't think need to be put in. You're still in charge of verifying that you agree with that. So you can look at their calculations of how many employees they think on a maximum shift. And they could say, well, I just want the number of employees. Well, you could say that realistically that you're probably still going to have a few people drop in that aren't employees. And so you want an extra 5 spaces. And so though they want the full 12, maybe you only give them 8. That is this planning commission's discretion is still to evaluate the data they provide and make that decision. And
Is that with this new one?
yes,
Currently, we're locked into what we have in our ordinance.
that's
correct?
right.
So
And so
this gives us some flexibility.
right, and this is kind of a middle road approach. So they're not getting a waiver. We do not use that word on purpose because we are not waiving the parking spaces. We're simply deferring it because it's not necessary for this operation. And we are reserving the right, and that's why one of the requirements is that it's noted that they, if needed, change in use, change in operation, or violation, they have to put in those deferred parking spaces. So the intent behind going back to that landscaping kind of comment. So let's say that their deferred parking lots, 12 parking spaces, because we're shown on the site plan where those 12 are that still are meet all of our dimensional requirements, meet access requirements. Do we require them to put 2 trees in there so that way, if and when the deferred area is implemented, are they just worrying about the parking lot? Or are they worrying about parking lots and then we need to remember, oh, we're also deferring 2 trees that go along with that parking requirement.
Okay.
Makes sense. Changing world. and how businesses operate. And so many employers are saying these days, you know, for optimum production and success of the business, we actually need our employees here. We don't like you staying home. No. People say, no, I like to be home. And so I think we need that flexibility. That's what I like about this. And what you said in terms of deferring versus waiver also makes a lot of sense. It leaves us the authority to do, amend if needed, but if not, good.
Put the trees in, beginning, and then they go and put it in the parking lot, we'll wreck the trees.
Well, no, because it's part of site plan. And so we should know that these are where they're proposing to put the trees versus the deferred parking. So one of the situations may be, I would assume in a lot of areas, you would just continue the row of parking. Either, I guess your standard idea is that there's parking on the left, parking on the right, and you maneuver in the middle. You would assume that they would just continue that another 30 feet or so for 6 more parking spaces or whatever the case may be. And so we would know they're going to go north more, so they would just need to add another tree on the other sides of the parking lot where they wouldn't continue to. So that would be part of our visioning. My 2 cents would be it's always easier to not go after multiple things. It's easier to say you have to put in this number of trees and then you're done. As opposed to playing this, remember, oh, it's not just the deferred parking, but I have to remember these 2 trees. It's easier just to remember this is only a waiver on deferred parking, not deferred landscaping. It simplifies it. And for the most part, I don't think our parking calculations are that extravagant. That 20% is going to equal like 10 trees or something large quantity. We're talking about a handful of trees. And that can be on any perimeter of that parking lot area, or they can add parking lot islands. And so there's a lot of flexibility where they could put that and it still count as a tree for the parking lot.
I have a question. It's off topic, but it's along the same thing. Can we implement a scenario similar to this with regard to all of these sidewalks to nowhere that we waive, where we could have a scenario where we could put it off, but if we ever put in sidewalks or anything like that, you'd be responsible for it at that time. It would give us an out on that. I'm very much like Bernie. I mean, we keep saying no, 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 but I mean, it's meaningless. Could you do something, or that's too much of a variable?
So you could potentially do that. The one thing I don't address in this amendment, and we didn't talk about last time, is typically if you're going to give them a certification of occupancy, that's the last step before they can occupy the site, and then they're up and operational. Usually, if there's anything outstanding between your temporary and your full, you have a performance bond. So you have money at the village. So if they don't follow through with the request, you can do it. And so that's that performance guarantee. And so one thing that isn't noted here is for deferred parking, are we requiring an escrow? So then if we're holding that, now the only concern is for doing that is it's a little bit of an administrative ugh, because it's not just we're looking at it for 1 or 2 years or a few months. This deferment could be for the life of the project. And so holding a few $100,000 for those however number of parking spaces, do we want to keep adjusting for inflation, new rates? Generally speaking, I think doing an escrow for this to ensure that it happens is a little bit more of a nightmare. Do we still have standing that you have to implement the site plan? Absolutely. That's part of the contingency of that site plan and understanding of these are being deferred unless. So usually for sidewalks and things of that nature, usually you have that escrow and you put those into play. So I don't want to say no for sidewalks. I haven't seen it used for sidewalks. It's mainly for parking lot areas that I've seen the deferment used. So I can't give you a solid answer on that.
I'm just curious.
I think that you could potentially do that if you're doing it for parking lots. Is there a big fundamental difference than sidewalks? other than it becomes an issue of, is there a change in use or an operation that's then triggering this non-compliance? Because for parking, you can look at intensity, you can look at those different factors. For a sidewalk, we're more looking at, is there connectivity? And so that's where it's an easier long-term game to say, well, we're just going to wait for a project to eventually redevelopment where we do connect everything together. Incrementally, we're going to win the pedestrian sidewalk game. But part of it too goes back to, what is the vision for those corridors? And specifically for Van Dyke with MDOT, that might be a trickier conversation than not. Specifically on that portion of Van Dyke to get sidewalks there.
So on the escrow of the parking lots, if we would do it, we'll have to capture the capital anyway. What would be the advantage to the prospective person to commit that capital, and as opposed to just go ahead, you got all the construction people there anyway, and put the parking lot in? I don't see the advantage.
Right, which is why I don't put anything about collecting escrow.
Oh, so you're, okay.
But I wanted to make sure I was being transparent and talking about escrow, and if that implementation question did come up, that we all understand that decision that we're making is that we're not collecting an escrow to say, which again, usually it's something that you use within a year whenever that project starts. And then if there's a temporary or something like that, then you can consider it. Usually, ideally, you don't want to have a temporary sitting out there more than 6 months. So there's a construction delay and you understand, or it's winter, and so you can't plant trees or flowers. And so you'll wait till April with a performance guarantee for those shrubs. And then they can still occupy the space temporarily. And then come spring, they're required to do it. And if they don't do it, you got their money and you will make sure that it's done.
See. Is this an amendment to an existing ordinance, or is this a brand new one?
So this would be an amendment to your zoning ordinance. So where we would propose to put it is under Article 6, Section 601. I didn't include 1 through 11 because we're not proposing any changes in this general provision component. Talks about making sure your parking's on site within 300 feet, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So this would be a new general standard that would allow the flexibility for deferment.
So would this have to come as a public hearing?
Correct. So if
It
we are
would.
comfortable with the drafted language, something we can consider doing tonight is moving forward with a motion to have a public hearing at our next regular planning commission meeting. After the public hearing, if we are comfortable with that language moving forward, then it would go to village council to ultimately be adopted.
Okay. Yes.
So going back to my landscaping question, are they required to put in the number of trees at the beginning?
Beginning.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to change the language slightly in D instead of implemented parking spaces for required parking spaces. Or I will say the total number of required parking spaces.
So they really only have to, they do the landscaping once and then they're done.
That's right.
Regardless of whether or not they ever do the other parking spaces.
Right.
Okay.
It is a lot easier in the long game to do that. And we're not talking about a forest. We're talking about a handful of trees just to make sure, and it's part of the plan. So
Motion would include the change of the wording from implemented to required, correct?
and then I would add the word total between the and number, just to make it abundantly clear. It's not the deferred versus implemented number.
Changing my motion as well.
Jim, did you get that motion? Is there any other discussion? All those in favor? Oh,
Seconded. that.
oh, who's second? Oh, Glenn did, I'm sorry. Yeah, we ought to have two.
Sorry.
Now I'll ask, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. So we'll set this up for a public hearing at February's meeting then? Okay. Anything else from you tonight, Caitlin? David, how about from you? Anything tonight?
In case you had not heard through the grapevine, there is a business owner couple that they're planning on closing hopefully this week, and hopefully no later than next week, on the European Deli, where they'll be putting in a coffee shop / bakery, all organic, 100% organic ingredients that go into their products, which would make them the only Michigan-based coffee shop that does 100% pure organic.
Does that mean the village is going to become healthier?
Our own Whole Foods.
Yes, their own Whole Foods. Well, that's
This is
good
a
news.
this is a deal that came together very quickly, just before the holidays, and it's contingent on an appraisal being done. But the folks were very proactive, got their financing through a local bank, and it was just a matter of having the appraisal completed and ready to close. And they were targeting this week. Haven't been able to get in touch with the folks to verify, when the closing is, but
Some renovations to the building?
absolutely,
Yeah.
and they're ready to rock and roll. They're excited and hope to be up and running, as little as maybe 60 days after they get into the building. Yeah, they're the Goodland Farms people, if you're familiar with them, I think.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. And there's the PNC Bank building has officially closed, and the local veterinarian that's up by Dryden Road in the township is moving in. The for sale sign finally came off. I noticed this past week. So he's in the process of slowly migrating from where he is to further south. So
So he won't operate both, he'll just move
Right.
to the new place?
exactly. Yeah, it was he was looking for more space, and he ended up being the winning bidder between another local business person that had their eye on it as well. So that's the latest on some economic development activity, and along with what you folks approved tonight and future site plans, another step forward for revitalizing the corridor here in town. So.
He's gonna have a real safe place to keep the animals, that's for sure.
Drop your
I don't know
dog
how
off
you're
at
gonna
the
get him through
window.
those
Yes.
Maybe a hamster.
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
That's
And-
good news. Very
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Kim, do you have anything for us tonight? Nothing?
Sir?
Any of the members have anything else? Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a support. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned.
Seconded.
Steve?
Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.